Hello and welcome to our beginner video course for the professional interior design software DomuS3D. Today we'll be learning the basic features of the software and how to create a simple interior design project. Before we begin, I'd like to mention our online support website available at www.support.domus3d.com, where you can find answers to all of your DomuS3D questions. You can browse through categories such as getting started, troubleshooting, or search for a specific topic using the search bar. You'll find what you need in one of the hundreds of how-to articles available at the site. Again, that's www.support.domus3d.com. Now let's get started with DomuS3D. This is the main interface of the program, divided into three major sections. Here at the top of the screen, we have the toolbar, home to all of the commands we need when designing. The toolbar is divided into groups where you can access specific menus. To the left, we have the components window, where we find our saved projects and all of the items we have downloaded from the Maticad digital library available on the cloud. From top to bottom, we have our saved projects, furniture, tiles, laying patterns, materials and finishes which can be applied to any surface in a project, panels, images, these can be applied to walls as poster or wallpaper, pre-configured room templates. Last but not least, we have 2D photos and lights if we've downloaded them to our local database. Otherwise, you won't see these sections here. Finally, in the center of the page, we have our main workspace of the program. Right now, we see the Live page, which contains news and updates from Maticad. We can see, for example, the latest items published in the Maticad digital library. In this section, you can download projects created by our design team, which you can open, modify, and reuse however you wish. As you already know, with DomuS3D, you have access to our digital library filled with a wide selection of tile and furnishing products, as well as unique materials that you can use for surface finish and advanced rendering. To avoid using all of your disk space, we suggest downloading onto your computer only the products that you want to use when designing. To download products from the digital library, click on the Catalogs tab on the Live page, and you'll see a few different sections which divide the types of materials available. Let's choose coverings, for example. Here we find a list of all the brands available in the digital library. We can scroll through them or use the search bar to find what we need. When we find the brand that we are interested in, we can click on the box. Within each brand, we'll find a list of the available collections, and we can pick those that we are interested in using or select all of them together. Let's click on Add to Cart, and we'll see a green banner appear here at the top of the screen, showing us that these items were successfully added to the cart. Now we can either go back to look for more products, or we can download the items in our cart. Let's click on Go to Cart, where we can check and modify the list of items and then import selected elements. This is going to launch the transfer process for the products in our cart. We can follow along with the progress by clicking on the little cloud icon here at the bottom left. When the process is finished, the cloud here will turn green. The final step is to click here on the Install All Elements button. At the end of the installation process, the items that we downloaded will be available in the local database, ready to be used in any of our design projects. We just downloaded tiles from the Florida Tile brand, and here they are in our components window. We have the option to set certain brands as favorites by clicking on the little heart icon here. This is a great option for brands that you use often and want to keep up to date. When you set a brand as a favorite, DomuS3D will automatically download any new products available, and your local database will always be up to date without you having to go in and manually check if there are new products available. Okay, so let's get started with a new project. We have a few different options to get started on a new project. We can use one of the preset room templates that we saw earlier by clicking on the Rooms tab here, and then double-clicking one of the templates. This opens a new project with the room template selected, which we can then modify however we like. Or we can click on the New button up here in the toolbar. In this window that appears, there are a few options we can sort through. There are a few preset room layouts here as well, for example, a rectangle, an L, or a trapezoid. Alternatively, we can import a DWG or a DXF file created with another CAD program. We can create a completely new project, which will give us an empty workspace, which could be useful if we want to paste a room that we copied from another project, like we did a few moments ago. And lastly, we have the default option, which opens a new project with the polyline tool active so that we can freely draw the floor plan quickly and simply in our new workspace. Once we decide on the best way for us to create our new project, we can type the name of the customer and a quick description of the project here, which can be useful indicators to help us find the project in the future. We can also set a specific width and height for the walls in this project if they are different than our default values. For example, let's set a width of 10 centimeters and 300 centimeters for the height. Now let's click OK. As you can see here, we already have the drawing tool activated, so all we have to do is click on any part of the empty grid to select the starting point of our drawing. The line starting from this point will create our first wall. You can see that we are only able to move orthogonally, either up, down, right, or left, because the default is set to only let us draw at 90-degree angles. If we want to design slanted walls, we can deactivate this default control by hitting the O key. We can activate it once more by again hitting O. You should always draw clockwise, as this will help us avoid problems with certain actions later on in the project. Once you indicate the direction that you want to move in with the mouse, you can type the exact length that you want the wall you are drawing to have. So again, we point our mouse in the correct direction and then we click on the point where we want the wall to end. This will insert a new vertex. If we made a mistake or need to undo our last action, we can right-click and select Undo Point, or we can hit Shift and Delete on our keyboard. We can see that the program lets us know when we are on the same horizontal line as the first vertex. That way we can properly close the room. At this point, I can either click on the first vertex or I can right-click and select Close Room from the menu. Now we have a complete room ready to be customized with furnishings and tiles. To move around the floor plan, we can use the mouse wheel, which lets us zoom in and out of our room. We can also click down on the mouse wheel, which will turn our cursor into a hand, and we can move the floor plan around our workspace. At any time, you can click the A key or double-click inside the room to recenter the room in the workspace. Now, on the right side of our screen, we can see a new menu that appeared after we drew our room. This is the Properties window where we find all the attributes and parameters of whatever entity we have highlighted within the project. This is a really useful spot where we can not only view the properties of our different items, but also change them quickly and easily. For example, let's click on this wall and we'll see its properties appear. We can change the width, which is now set to 10 centimeters. I'll write 30 centimeters here. Maybe this is an exterior wall, and then I click Enter. We can also click on the checkbox Apply to all walls to change all walls at the same time. Another quick way to change the width of our walls is to simply drag either the interior or exterior sides of the wall. Each wall is composed of 3 distinct parts: the wall structure, the interior wall surface, and the exterior wall surface. If we click on the middle of the wall, selecting the wall structure, we can move the wall forwards or backwards, keeping the width the same. If we instead click on one of the wall surfaces, we can drag it in order to change the width, although it's hard to get a precise measurement since we don't currently have any dimensions showing to help us. After we click to select a wall, if we click again, we'll call up the dimensions so we can be as precise as we like, writing exact measurements for both the width and the distance to other angles in the room. To move from one field to another, we hit the Tab key on the keyboard. For the wall structure as well, if we click for a second time, the dimensions will pop up here showing the exact measurements. Don't forget that we can always undo the last action that we took by either clicking the button in the top toolbar with the back arrow, or we can simply hit Ctrl-Z. To redo an action that we undid, we can click this Redo button here or use Ctrl-Y. In the current project, we are working in centimeters as our unit of measurement. At any time, we can switch our unit of measurement, for example, if we want to work with feet and inches. To switch, let's click on File and then on Options. In the Options window, scroll down until we find the Unit of Measure section. Once we open the drop-down menu, we can select whichever one we want. Let's take a quick look at the series of commands here in the main toolbar in the Layout tab. With the New Wall command, we can create new walls inside our room. They can be walls of any shape and height, creating corners or smaller rooms within our main room. To end the operation, we can either right-click and select Stop, or we can hit the Escape key. These walls can be modified in all the ways that we have already seen. To delete a wall, we can right-click and select Delete, and then choose whether we want to delete only the highlighted segment that I clicked on, or all the interior walls connected to one another. When the interior walls are drawn to close off a part of the room, the original room will be automatically divided into two separate rooms. We can right-click on the wall again and choose whether to delete the room or restore our single room. The Shape Wall command gives us a few different options. We can add a new corner, moving it to either the inside or outside of the wall. We can add a hollow or indent in our wall. First, we click the starting point, then drag the wall towards the center of the room or towards the exterior, however we like. We can also draw an oblique hollow or angled indent into our wall. Same as before, we should first click the starting point, then indicate the length of the indent, and finally its width. With the Create Pillar command, we can create a column of whatever size we choose. This will be a normal wall object within our project, which we can move to the correct point in our floor plan. With the Create Opening command, we can create openings and niches. In the pop-up window that appears, we first insert the desired measurements, for example 1 meter and 20 centimeters above ground, 80 centimeters long, and 1 meter 60 centimeters high. If we want to create a niche, we should click this box here and then insert the depth, which has to be smaller than the width of the wall. For example, let's make it 20 centimeters. Now we can click OK and we see the outline of the opening with the correct dimensions appear in our floor plan. And we can now move it around and position it where we want by clicking on the mouse. Make sure that the outline turns green. This indicates that we are in a possible point where we can insert the opening. Otherwise, it will remain red. This new opening, just like all our other items in the project, can be modified using the Properties window, where we can change the position and the size. Let's change, for example, depth and width. With DomuS3D, we can easily create slanted ceilings of various shapes and sizes. Let's right-click within our room and select the Ceiling option from the menu, then Customize Ceiling. We can see that the height of the ceiling at each vertex in our room is shown. We can change any of these by typing a new value. Here again, to move from one field to the other, we hit the Tab key on the keyboard. Let's change the height of the two vertices at the right. We can also freely insert artificial ridge beams or tracing lines that indicate where we want our ceiling to change shape. Let's add one here so we can draw a double-pitched roof. Now, if we go into 3D navigation by clicking on the navigation button here at the top, we can see the results. The last thing we want to look at in our floor plan is creating 3D objects, like a half wall in our project. The easiest way to do this is by drawing the perimeter of the shape we want to insert on the floor of our room using the CAD tools. Again, we can either click or type exact measurements. Once we confirm the measurements, a small pop-up window will appear, which gives us a few possibilities for the shape we just drew. Let's choose Create Object. Now all we have to do is insert the height that we want. Let's put 1 meter, and then we select Wall Object, and then OK. We just created the 3D object, and now, if we click on it, we can see its properties appear in the Properties window. Now, let's say we want to position the half wall in the top right corner of the room. With the Move command, we can start moving the wall. The object will follow the cursor. It's currently anchored to the bottom left corner. We can change the position of the mouse cursor with respect to the object by hitting the P key. Now, let's move our object close to the top wall and then drag it until we get the correct position. We can use the one-point command to move the object and position it by clicking on the exact point where we want the vertex of the object to be. Finally, the feature Point plus Delta is similar, but it lets us insert an exact distance relative to the origin to move the object. Let's click on the top right corner again and insert a delta of 30 centimeters. With Ctrl-Z, we can undo this. Creating objects like this is also possible in the 2D wall view. That view lets us easily create objects like drop ceilings, frames, simple staircases, and more. Now, let's insert our first furnishing items into our project. Let's start with doors and windows, which we can find in the Furnishings tab under the category Doors and Windows. Let's choose a door and drag it into our project, holding down the left mouse button. We can insert exact distances from the left and right angles or position it with a click. For all doors and windows, if we click on their perimeter, we can check and modify various parameters in the Property window, like height show the door opening, change the direction of opening from right to left or vice versa, or likewise position the door on the inside or outside of the wall. We can choose whether or not to display dimensions and so on. Let's insert a window the same way. Now, let's search for a few furniture pieces to insert into our room. We'll go back from the category Doors and Windows, and we'll select the category Bathroom. Let's start with the toilet. If we've already created a cart with the material that we've selected for this project, it will make our operations even faster. Let's select this item and drag it into the project. It automatically lines up with the wall as we approach it. We can position it with a click, or we can again insert exact measurements in the fields available. Don't forget that we can move from one field to another using the Tab key. When we've positioned the item, the software will automatically suggest related items that belong to the same collection. We can see that the matching bidet has been suggested, and we can drag it into position. Once again, the software suggests items, but this time, let's ignore it by moving the cursor towards the far left of the screen. This will make the suggested items disappear. Here at the top of our Components window, we now have the work area that displays all of the items we've used in our project so far. The bidet is currently selected, and we see 4 tabs below it. Hookable? This shows only items that are hookable to the selected item. For example, in this case, bidet faucets that hook to the bidet. Bidet, which will filter to all the items that belong to the same category, so in this case, all of the bidets in our database. Next, we have the name of the collection, and this will show us all of the items available from the same collection. Lastly, we have All, which will cancel any filter that we previously selected and show us all the items in our database. Let's take a look in more detail at the hookable items, which for the bidet can be faucets like I mentioned before. Let's select one and drag it into the project, and we'll see that a green line will appear, indicating that the element will snap to the bidet correctly. We can click the mouse to confirm our action, and now the faucet is positioned correctly, at the right elevation without our having to worry about it. If we want to add this faucet to the cart of our favorite elements, which we haven't yet done, we can drag it towards the bottom where we find our carts and drop it in the desired cart. For toilets, the hookable items can be flush plates, for example, and these can quickly be positioned as well. Now, let's go back to the cart with our favorites and look for a vanity. We'll drag it and drop it into the project. Then, let's look for a faucet that will hook to our vanity, and we'll insert it. As we drag it into our project, if we move it close to the bidet, we can see that the line will turn orange, indicating that we can hook it to this position, but it is not a correctly matching item. If we move it into the sink, on the other hand, the line turns green again. If you want, you can deactivate the hooking mechanism by hitting the space bar. In this case, to correctly hook the faucet, we will have to manually place it, rotating it with the plus or minus keys. We'll also have to correctly set the elevation. If we hit the H key and then select the top of our vanity, we'll give our faucet the same elevation as the vanity top. Now, let's look for a shower tray. We'll drag it and position it in this angle, and the software automatically shows us the shower boxes that are the correct form and size from all those available, making our job a lot simpler. Let's also look for a shower head and faucet. Most of our positioning for items can be done in our 3D virtual navigation view as well. We can open this view by clicking on the Navigate button up in our top toolbar, or we can right-click and select Virtual Navigation. Let's see how we can move around in the virtual navigation window. If we hold down the left mouse button, we can rotate our view right or left and up or down. If we hold down the right mouse button, we will move our viewpoint backwards or forwards, left or right. Using the mouse wheel, we can raise or lower the viewpoint, keeping the same perspective. We can also use the keyboard. With W, we move forward. With S, we move farther away. With A, we'll move to the left. With D, we move right. With the left and right arrow keys, we rotate left and right. And with the plus and minus keys, we raise or lower the viewpoint. Now that we know how to move around in 3D navigation, let's try to position something like a mirror. We can search for mirrors in the Components window, then pick one and drag it into our project. Once we drop it here, we can refine its position by using the Move3D command. This gives us the 3 arrows in the directions of our 3 Cartesian axes, which helps us move our object precisely along one axis at a time. If we move our mouse over one arrow, we can see that it will turn yellow and let us move the object in that specific directions. Or we can use the little squares between 2 axes to move our object along the 2 axes highlighted. For example, this one here is the XZ plane. We can also change the position of our objects by modifying the X, Y, and Z positions here. To confirm our new position, we hit Enter, or we can cancel our repositioning by hitting Escape. Right-clicking on our vanity and selecting Finishing will pull up a list of all the finishes that are made available by the manufacturer, those in which you can actually buy this piece. In the window on the right, we can see the 3 sections of the vanity, the structure, the front face, and the drawers. For each section, we can choose our finish. We are also free to apply any other finish out of all those available in the Materials section if we would like. The furniture piece may not be available in a certain color or material in real life, but within the program we can decide to design it however we like. In addition to moving our object in 3D, we can also rotate any object with precision along our 3 axes with the command Rotate 3D. To tile or cover a surface, we have to move to the Coverings section. Down here we can see that there are different modes in which we can work. The first one allows us to tile an entire surface, the most common option when working with a floor. The second option lets us work in horizontal strips. This is the most common option for walls. We can also work with vertical strips here. And these last 2 are for substituting specific tiles, either single tiles or multiple ones, for surfaces that have already been tiled. We'll take a look at these in detail shortly. Let's start with the floor. So, we select the first option to work on the entire surface. Here below, we have a number of parameters that we can change, like the dimension and the color of the grout, which we can also change at a later time, and the angle of tiling. We have to be careful here and make sure that we are always using a comma and not a point to indicate decimals, since the point will not be interpreted correctly by the program. At this point, we can drag the tile that we have chosen onto the floor, and you'll see our floor will be covered completely by the tile. If we want to try a few different options, we can keep dragging new products, and the software will continue to substitute the material, not overlay. In the top left, we can find the work area with the history of the products used in the project. That way we can easily find any product we have already used, so we can quickly use it again at a later stage. Once we've applied the tile, we can open the 2D view to make a few changes. So let's right-click and then select Floor 2D. Here we can change the size of the grout or the material and the color. For example, let's set the grout size at 0.4 instead of 0.2. Then we can apply a material like this one, selecting Tile Entire Wall as our destination. We can modify the installation origin, which is currently at this point, but maybe we want to move it here. The direction of our tiles, for example, let's say we want it at 30 degrees or 45. We can also change the off-shaded effect that the software has automatically created. If the tile that we are using has numerous faces, the software mixes them in random order when it lays the tile. If we want, we can change this selection manually. With the Customize Off-Shaded command, we can move between each tile face until we find the one that we want. Right-clicking again, we will find the command Rotate, even if with this particular tile it is deactivated. An interesting alternative when tiling is to use a parametric laying pattern, which we can find in the Patterns section. There are almost 400 available, and they let us lay tile in complex patterns and designs very simply. We can lay a pattern just like a tile or a panel. All our laying patterns are parametric, meaning that they will adapt to the size of the specific tile that we will place into the pattern. For example, let's choose this staggered pattern with 3 tiles. On the floor, we can see the 3 colored areas appear, which we will need to then fill with whatever tiles we choose. Let's pick these blanks and begin placing them in our pattern, and there we go. We can keep trying different tiles until we get the exact result we want. When we use laying patterns, we have to be careful to follow any geometric constraints of the specific pattern we choose. If there are any constraints, we'll see them in the bottom of the preview. Let's take a look at another example. Let's choose a more complicated pattern like this one. After we've placed it into our project, we can go back to the Coverings section, and we see that DomuS3D automatically activated multi-tile substitution. Let's search for a trapezoid tile, and here we have it. With just a few clicks, we've created a really unique floor. Let's move on to wall coverings. When tiling walls, we can again tile the entire surface of the wall if we would like. More often, however, we'll work in horizontal strips. We can select the surface as our destination, meaning the wall onto which we will drag the material, or I can select the entire room if I want to apply the horizontal strips to all of the walls at once. I can select the number of rows that I want to create, for example 6. And here we have 6 rows of the selected tile. Now we can lay 2 rows of this different product and then again 4 more rows of the same tile as before. Once we've tiled our wall and we have our rows, we can use the Move Strip Up or Move Strip Down commands to move their positions relative to one another. Also, we can change the height of each strip, specifying in our Properties window a different number of tiles. For example, we can go from a height of 2 tiles to 3 or 4. Or we can put in an exact height, for example, 45 centimeters, and in this case the tiles will be cut to match this height. If we activate the option Change Similar Tiles, we can substitute all the tiles in the strip with another tile with the same shape. If we instead activate the option Change Single Tile, we can substitute one tile at a time. If we want to create a decorative accent by substituting multiple tiles, we can speed up the operation by clicking on the Change Tile button. This command lets us select the tiles that we want to change like this. When we are done selecting our tiles, we can right-click and then choose the tile that we want to insert. In this case, this gray tile is what we want, so we click OK. Once we've tiled the wall to our satisfaction, we can copy and paste the tiling onto another wall in our room. We can also copy it to all of the walls in the room with one click by using the command Apply to all walls in the room. The lane patterns that we used for our floor can be used on walls as well. Let's delete the tiling that we put on this wall, right-click, delete tiling, and let's go back to the section Patterns. Let's pick the same pattern that we used before. We'll set the rotation to 0 and the height to 160 centimeters, and we'll drag the pattern onto our wall. And then we'll pick a tile and fill our pattern. Now we have a strip with the preset height with our trapezoid pattern. If we want, we can add more strips above it. Or with the command Modify Delete, we can select and delete certain tiles so we can highlight the upper part of our strip. Below the deleted tiles, the material used for the grout will remain, but it's possible to apply a different plaster quickly. Let's move our work over to the shower area. To make it easier for ourselves, we are going to hide the glass doors. To create vertical tiling strips, let's activate this option here. Down here, we need to specify the number of rows and how many columns of the tiles we would like. For example, 12 rows and 3 columns. Now, let's drag the tile that we selected and we'll see an outline of our vertical tiling appear, which we can position anywhere we would like. Let's repeat the same action, but this time with 6 columns. As usual, with Ctrl-Z, we can undo the last action. Another useful feature is the ability to create a specific tiling area corresponding to our shower. If we right-click on the corner of our shower, in the bottom of the menu we'll find Corner, and then Tile Shower Box Corner. In this window, divided in left side and right side, we can specify the width of the left side, which we'll set at 130 centimeters, imagining that this is the right size of the shower floor, and a height of 240 centimeters. For the right side, we'll again set the width to 130 centimeters and 240 centimeters for the height. We can choose any tile at this point, since it will be easy to change later. Or we can choose to apply a pattern. The program will fill the space with a generic straight lay pattern, but this too can be changed later. Once we've created the area, we can apply any lane pattern by simply dragging it. Now, let's find a rhombus-shaped tile, and here we go. If we want to resize these areas, we need to go into the 2D wall view and with a right-click, select Resize Tiling. Now, we can drag the sides of our tiling area until we get the result we need. Now, let's take a look at a final option we have when tiling, the creation of specific tiling areas and rugs. We can use our CAD tools to draw the shape of the area that we want to create, which can be a simple rectangle or a more complex shape, which we can draw with the polyline tool. Once again, the orthogonality control is active by default, meaning that we can only draw 90-degree lines, but we can deactivate it by hitting the O key. Once we are done drawing, the program will ask us what we want to do with the line, and in this case, we'll select Create Tiling Area. Just like when we created our shower area, here we can choose any tile or lane pattern, as this will be quite easy to modify later on. If we want to apply a finish to a non-tiled part of our wall, we should open the Materials section, where we have all types of materials which can be applied to any surface. For example, plasters, plastics, metals, textiles, leather, glass, and much more. In this case, we can search for a plaster which can be applied to our surfaces. If we click on the material that we just placed in our project, we'll find it in the Properties window, where we can choose to apply this material to all of our walls. To add a room to our project and create a multi-room layout, the simplest option we have is to add a preset room template available in the Rooms section of our Components window. We import it into the project, we move it close to the wall we want to attach it, and as you can see, the two rooms merge automatically. Now we can modify the room by using the tools that we saw at the beginning of the course. We can also draw a room from scratch using the CAD tools and then merge it to the first room using the same procedure. If we switch to our 3D navigation, we will now see our new room. We can extend the flooring from our first room into our new room by right-clicking and selecting Extend Floor Tiling. Then we click on the surface that we want to cover, and to end the operation, hit Escape. The blue lines that we see show us the outline of the room that is currently active. Right now, that's the main room. We can hide these if they bother us by hitting Ctrl F9. To delete the second room, we right-click a blank area inside the room and then select Delete. We can confirm that we want to delete this room and all of the objects found within it. Let's now start to prepare our room for rendering, the creation of our photorealistic HD image. The first thing we are going to look at is lighting. This little yellow light bulb is the ambient light that automatically gets placed in the center of the room when we create it. This light source, like all the light sources in our project, can be turned off and on depending on the final effect we want to achieve. In the Properties window, we have the possibility to change the elevation of the lights or to insert a dominant color. For example, here, let's set a champagne color for a slightly warmer tone. We can create other types of light sources, for example, lamps, spotlights, or neon lights. If we create a spotlight, we'll see a cone of light appear in our layout, and this can be positioned however we want. We can set both the elevation of the spotlight and the angle and focus of its beam. Here too, we can set a dominant color depending on the overall effect that we want to achieve. Let's duplicate the spotlight we just created and position it in the shower area. We can right-click on the spotlight, select Copy, and position it how we want. This second light will have inherited all of the properties of the first one, but if we want, we can change it further. Each light source can be associated with a group. If we have several light sources in our project, this grouping allows us to manage our lights simply and efficiently. Right now, we see that there is only one group available in our project, but we can add a new one by simply typing a new name. So I'll associate this light with a new group that we'll call Spotlight's Shower Area. Then I'll repeat the same thing for the first spotlight. We can also duplicate this light in order to have multiple repetitions of the same object. positioned at a fixed difference between one another. To do this, let's right-click our light and we'll click Copy and then Array. Here we can set a distance between the repeated objects along the three axes X, Y, and Z, and we can set the number of repetitions. For example, here we are asking the software to create 3 objects, including the first one which already exists, at a distance of 30 centimeters from one another along the Y-axis, therefore moving towards the top of our page. By hitting Apply, we can immediately see the results, so we can then decide whether or not to confirm the operation. This feature is really helpful in a lot of cases, and it can be applied for any type of object. For example, let's imagine we wanted to create a wood beam ceiling. We could create one wood beam and then copy it easily in an array with this function. In the layout window, we can change the direction of the light rays coming from the sun, represented by this little sun icon. Dragging this icon and elongating the arrows, we can decide where the sunlight will come from and at what angle the light will enter into our room. This lets us have more or less direct sunlight to illuminate the inside of our room. In this example, the sunlight will enter directly from our window. Now, we want to insert a background image so we can see a realistic environment outside our windows. We can choose from among the many panoramic images available. Using this slide, we can rotate our image so that we can see the exact part of the image that we want from our window. We can regulate the light intensity. For example, if we want to prepare a daytime scene with strong sunlight, we can set the outdoor scene shown through the window to be slightly or even very overexposed, just like it would be in a real photograph under the same conditions. A large part of the images available for our background are HDR, and they integrate a real light source that substitutes the sun in our project. In this case, the direction of the light that enters from the window depends on the positioning of the image. We can verify this by switching back to our layout, where we can see that the sun, which was yellow before, indicating that it was active, has been automatically deactivated and is no longer yellow. Now, let's look for the right viewpoint, or the portion of our room scene that we want to render. Like we saw previously, the red border indicates that our current viewpoint is outside of the room. In fact, our hypothetical camera will be somewhere around here. This could represent a problem because we have the exterior wall which will block our view into the room. In this case, however, all we need to do is hide the exterior wall by selecting Visibility and then Hide. Once we find the exact point that we like, we can normalize our viewpoint by hitting the N key, aligning our vertical perspective lines. We recommend this action because it generally renders the image more realistically, avoiding distortions of the objects in the scene. Before we save our viewpoint, we want to first go to View Properties to change the field of view, which has a default value of 70 degrees. This creates a very wide view, which lets us view a large portion of the room. However, it also creates an effect that could introduce distortions. Let's try to bring this value down to 50 degrees, which is normally the value associated with the human eye. The best value for the project we are working on will have to be experimented with in order to find the right compromise based on the size of the room and the portion that we want to represent in our rendering. We've forgotten that one of the shower doors is still hidden from the view. In fact, in the layout, the object is highlighted in red. Let's make it visible again for our final composition. Next, let's click on Save View, which will save this view and all of its properties. We'll call it Custom View, and now we can get back to it in the future with just one click. We can save several views, giving each individual viewpoint its own name. The list of saved views can be seen at any time by clicking on the My Views button. We can switch between our views with a simple click. In the layout, the positions of all of our saved views are shown with these little cameras. Here in the layout window, it is possible to move the focus of the view that we had set. Doing this moves the two blue lines that show our depth of field as well, or the portion of framed space that will be in focus when we create our rendering. In this case, for example, the item found between the two blue lines will be the main focus of our image. It will be in focus while the other objects outside of these lines will be slightly blurred for a really nice final effect. Just like in a real photograph, the depth of field depends primarily on the aperture of the camera, the distance of the object that we want to put into focus, and the width of the frame. All of these parameters can be set by simply dragging the relative lines or from within the Properties window for our view. The aperture of the diaphragm is indicated with the F number. The smaller the F number, the more open the diaphragm, resulting in a smaller focused portion of our frame. On the contrary, with a larger F number, more of our frame will be in focus. Let's move on to the actual processing of our rendering image. Before we get started, it is important to note that our rendering processing can take place directly within DomuS3D, which is the simplest and most direct way, but this will also mean that the program will be occupied during the processing and we will not be able to continue working on this or any other project. Another option is to export the rendering package for processing to our external module, Render Manager, which we can open in our toolbar by clicking on Render Manager. This will allow us to render our image while simultaneously continuing to work within DomuS3D. Let's click on the Start Rendering button here in our toolbar, which opens up the settings for our rendering engine. Here we can choose the size of our image, which can be expressed in pixels, for example 800 by 600, or in proportion to what we see on our screen. In this case, ×2 indicates a resolution twice as large as the image we now see on our screen. Next, we can choose the mode with which we want to process our rendering, either progressive or interactive. When we work within DomuS3D, we want to use the interactive mode, which launches our rendering such that the image will continue to improve as more time passes without any preset endpoint. Once we are satisfied with the quality, we have to manually end the processing. If we want to send our rendering to Render Manager, we should select the progressive mode, which lets us process our rendering with a predetermined endpoint until it reaches either a maximum execution time or a desired level of quality. Once it hits that point, the processing will stop and our image will be saved. Lastly, we have to choose the type of image that we want to obtain. This can be either a standard rectangular image or a 360-degree panoramic image, either standard or stereoscopic. Stereoscopic images can also be viewed using virtual reality goggles. In this case, let's pick a normal rectangular image with the interactive mode and we'll click Start Rendering. After about 10 to 20 seconds, we should see the image already begin to take shape. We can see here at the top of our image that a correct exposure value was calculated for this image based on its properties and the items contained within it. If, however, we think that the final image is too bright or too dark, thanks to this slider we can change the exposure value at any moment. Once our desired quality has been reached, we can stop the processing by clicking on Stop, confirm the interruption and save the image. After a few seconds, during which the digital noise reduction operations take place, the final image appears with a post-production module, which lets us adjust some of the most important parameters, like exposure, contrast, the light and shadow channels, and saturation. Here we can also set the sharpness and clarity. Another interesting post-production command is our EXR light settings. Here we can change the intensity of the lights present in our project without having to reprocess our rendering. In this case, we have 4 channels, which correspond to the 3 groups of lights that we created, plus the dome channel, which represents the sun attached to the HDR background outside the window. There are a number of other tools that we won't look at in detail now, but can be very useful, such as crop, vertical or horizontal flip, adjust color levels, and artistic filters such as pencil sketch or oil paint. Now, let's save our image using the Save command here in the top left. Let's now take a look at how to use Render Manager to execute our rendering outside of DomuS3D, keeping the software open for use. Let's again click on Start Rendering, but this time we will set the mode to Progressive instead of Interactive. We can see the 2 new controls appear, which let us decide the level of quality that we want to reach and if we want a maximum time dedicated to the rendering before it is interrupted. For example, in this case, we are asking the software to produce an image of very high quality and the processing will stop after a maximum of 30 minutes. We'll leave standard as the type of image, and if we now click on Export Job for Render Manager, we will save the package with the data we need to process the image in Render Manager. To learn more about the Render Manager module, take a look at our online knowledge base available at the website support.domus3d.com. Let's now take a look at a few of our other project tools, like our estimates and our printouts. For our material estimates, let's click on Tools in our top toolbar and then find the button Calculate. Now we have an estimate of all of the materials used in the project. The table can be edited. For example, we can delete the accessories that have been added at the end of our project for aesthetic purposes only, or we can modify the calculation of the waste percentages. Remember to click on the Update button after operations of this kind. The waste percentages can also be typed straight into the table in the proper item line. We can change the units from square meters to pieces. We can also export the table to Excel for further editing and customization. For our project printouts, we have a few different tools that we can use. We can create a sales brochure for a client using one of the templates available. All we have to do is pick one, easy enough using the filters here on the side, and there we have it. The template will fill with the necessary project info and our sales brochure opens as a Word document, meaning that it can be edited completely in Word. In this particular template, we have the layout, the wall views, and we have an image of our entire scene, which we can substitute with the rendering that we created just a few moments ago. We can export this as a docx or a PDF. Next, we can click on the Print for Installer button, which will give us a technical printout with all of the necessary instructions for the installer. Again, there are various templates we can choose from, and in all of them we'll have information on the lane pattern, the origins and more available. The last type of project printout that we have is one that we can build using our external module called Composer. Let's click on Print with Composer, and we will save the package with all of the information necessary, an operation which takes about 10 or 15 seconds as it exports the project layout, the views, and all other important information. The Composer module will open automatically, and here we can first pick the paper format on which we want to work, from A5 to A0 or letter. In this case, we've chosen an A3 with horizontal orientation. The first thing we can do is apply a title block to all of our pages. On this title block, we'll find the project information that we inserted at the start of our project, namely client name, description, date, and of course our company logo. Here on the left side, we see all of the individual pieces of our project that are available, and each of these can be dragged and positioned on our page. On our pages, we have the same scale applied to all of the images. Therefore, if we change the size of one layout, all of the other elements will change as well. We can add a new page by clicking the plus symbol here, and again, we can drag whatever we want to position on the page. We also have tools to align images, to insert titles and notes, lines, boxes, and disclaimers. We can insert our images, for example the rendering that we created just a few moments ago for the final touch. The last step is to save our PDF. As we just saw in the printouts we just created, the perspective drawings do not have dimensions showing, but these can be really important and can be inserted quickly and easily. Let's double-click on any of the interior walls of our room to open up the 2D wall view. Here at the top in the Tools sections, let's click on the Automatic Dimensions button. We can choose whether to activate this for this wall only or for all the walls in our project. Click OK to confirm and we'll see the automatic dimensions appear, namely those that measure the main entity. We can add other measurements manually using the Dimension command. In this case, we'll have to click the starting and end points where we want to measure the distance. For example, the lowest point of the mirror and the floor, and the third click to decide where we want to position the dimension. The command will remain active so we can insert an unlimited number of measurements, and we can interrupt the operation at any time by hitting Escape. Now that we've activated the dimensions on all of the walls, they will be visible on all types of printouts that we saw before. For today, that is where we are going to end. For further exploration of DomuS3D, I recommend taking a look at our intermediate and advanced courses and all of our videos available on our YouTube page. And most importantly, don't forget to take advantage of our online guide, available at www.support.domus3d.com, where you will find hundreds of how-to articles and help guides covering a wide variety of topics.